filed those in particular was those were entities where local regulators prior to my filing had already stepped in and initiated their own processes. And so I couldn't have, even if I had wanted to, for those entities.
And that includes FTX Australia?
Yes.
You also said that 8 minutes after you filed the initial motion for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, $4 billion more of liquidity basically was called in. Someone said that they could give you that cash injection. Is that correct?
I don't dispute that I've said something like that.
But did you actually get the liquidity of $4 billion offered to you 8 minutes after you filed the Chapter 11? So that would have been 4:38 in the morning. Did you get that actually offered to you?
Yes.
By whom? Can you state?
I cannot.
Okay. Why haven't you filed a motion to voluntarily dismiss the bankruptcy cases under U.S. Bankruptcy Code Section 1112 if you believed that you could save the company through that cash injection, and you also thought that FTX US and FTX Japan were fully solvent?
I acknowledge your question. I want to make sure that I operate in a responsible and compliant manner here. I would be discussing what would or would not be appropriate with counsel, and at the end of the day, I think that the right parties to be filing here would not be. I think that the right parties would be regulators, administrators who are overseeing this internationally, who have been leading the charge. But I acknowledge your question there.
Okay, so you're saying essentially that's a non-answer, right? Like, because you didn't say why you haven't filed that motion. You just said you would talk with counselors about that. What counselors, who are you paying? Like what does it cost you right now for counsel, and how are you affording that? Given you said that you were essentially cash poor, although you said you also had potentially up to $100,000 left.
That's something I'm trying to figure out right now.
So you have them on retainer without actual payment?
I can't go into the details. There are also potentially various relevant D&O policies which are being examined as well. But frankly, that is a concern for me.
Okay. And what funds were lost in the hack, and from what entities that you're aware of?
I don't know the details of that. That happened after the Chapter 11 team.
Okay.
But I think to my knowledge, this sort of on-chain analytics, as long as you make sure to distinguish between the various custodial processes that were taken then, to my knowledge, have done a decent job of tracking what that was, but I don't know a ton more than that.
Okay. But you said that FTX US lost $250 million in the hack. That was a statement from you. Correct?
When did I say that?
You said that in the past few days, literally. So if you said that FTX lost $250 million in the hack, where are you getting that information from?
So I would be surprised if I'd said that it had done that. I think I wouldn't be surprised if I'd speculated that maybe the notional of it was something kind of similar to that based on what had happened on chain, but I don't think I know exactly how much it was or from exactly what entity.
Okay, but if you're assuming that much, and Arkham Intelligence also reported that around $204 million of funds were moved off of that U.S. exchange to Alameda just a few days prior to the bankruptcy. Does that mean there's a plausibility of a $500 million hole at FTX or at US, or does that mean there's just a plausibility of a $250,000 hole?
So I will make a few notes. This is all as of when I had last looked into it, and my data is somewhat stale here, so I'm just guessing as best I can. First of all, the funds moved off. There are also funds moved on. There were a lot of deposits and withdrawals on FTX US from many customers, including Alameda, but those were fully solvent accounts, and to my knowledge, all of the customers ended positive on FTX US, such that there was no hole created by any of that activity. There's not an equivalent of what happened on the international exchange, so that part would not contribute to it. In terms of the hack, I don't know how much that came from FTX US. I might be knowable from looking at on-chain activity. I had believed FTX.
I've lost his audio. Is it just
Yeah,
me?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. No, it's me too.
oh, sorry. Yeah,
Oh, you're
yeah,
back.
Okay,
Sorry,
Sam, we
Sam.
just lost you there for about
you cut off.
10 seconds.
yeah. Yep, sorry, I'm back. But I had and basically like I to my knowledge, I think that there were substantial surpluses there, such that I think it would still be to my knowledge, solvent. Although again, I don't have access to current data.
Okay, all right. And
hold on that point regarding the US customers. So I know Altcoin Psycho pinned a tweet, and I know many people that are in very similar positions. He says, "What about the thousands of customers who did an ACH withdrawal pre-bankruptcy announcement and never received their money in their bank? Surely, if FTX US was fully solvent, the bank account used to process the ACH withdrawals should have continued processing."
Are these ones that were processed shortly prior to that, or that were processed that were in
before? Yeah, just shortly prior to the announcement, there were a whole lot of customer withdrawals, and those just stopped being paid.
So I can't speak to the actions taken by people who are running that business right now, or what decisions they are or aren't making. Just my belief that there would exist the funds to pay out to customers were that to be the chosen pathway. But I can't speak to which decisions are being made about whether or not to choose that pathway.
But some of these were done days before. Some of these were actually done days before.
I mean, I don't know the details of individual transfers. ACH transfers can take a week to clear sometimes. But again, I don't have access to look into individual ones. I
mean, they can take a week to clear. I agree with you that they can take a week to clear. That's not a problem. But once they are in the system, it's just a case of clearing. It's not a case. It's if the transaction's in the system.
That's a chargeback.
From a solvent entity. From a solvent entity.
There were lots of customers charging back to FTX US every day, attempting to ACH in and then retroactively cancel those. Those were solvent customers, although dicks. I don't know the details of this system, but in general, US fiat transfers are quite messy, and for both ACH and credit card related transfers, it is very difficult to have confidence in a transfer until as long as a month after it's been initiated. So that is a mess.
Sam, can I ask you a question? And I don't want to interrogate you and ask you specific questions, but try to understand 29-year-old dealing with the collapse of an empire, which affected probably in excess of 10, 20, 30, maybe even 40 million people and a whole industry around it.
I wish we had that many
knocking off billions.
But
still, I mean, your customers, etc. But okay, millions of customers. Trying to understand, as a 29-year-old, who was around you? Who were the 5 people that you were calling and speaking to? And I'm trying to get a feel for the type of discussions that were happening as this whole thing started to collapse. Trying to get a feel for what were the top 5 numbers that you were calling, and I'm trying to get a feel for what they were telling you to do.
So it's a good question, and there was a group of employees working around me to try to do what we could. I was calling a number of prospective funders to investigate, potential opportunities to.
But who were your confidants? Who were the people that were guiding you? Like, I know when something happens to me, I've got 5 people in the office who are really close to me, and I know who they are, and they're partners, and they know that they're brothers for life. Who were you phoning? Were you phoning Caroline? Were you speaking to Gary?
Gary, and Gary being a childhood friend and a co-founder as well. Sam, I'd love to know more about his involvement.
So, I mean, I was calling basically, calling and or speaking to in person, primarily other core employees of the company, other employees who had, relevant stakes in it, who had, relevant thoughts, but it was, as the core employees were the bulk of who I was, counseling with. Then I did call, some external advisors, a few key investors. I called a few.
What about Caroline? What about Caroline? Were you speaking to Caroline during this whole thing? I mean, were you guys aligning on exactly how much money Alameda had and what the value of the positions was? Because, ultimately she was a CEO. I mean, how many times where was she on the list? In terms of frequency, was she number 1? Was she number 3? Was she number 5?
She was not physically in the same place as me when this is happening, so there were, a fair number of phone calls, to do exactly what you said. Like, as soon as this happened, one of the first things that we said was we need to know exactly what the deal is with not just Alameda's balances and positions on FTX, but everywhere. We want to know exactly what funds there are. We want to know, whether margin call will be able to be hit. We want to know how long it would take to deliver those. And so there were certainly a lot of conversations, with her around that. Although she wasn't physically in the Bahamas when this was happening, and so I was, speaking more frequently in some sense to the employees who were there.
What about Dan Friedberg?
I don't want to, I think, go into where specific employees' heads were at, just because I think that's for them to talk about it if they want to.
But was he one of the top 5, or was he one of the top 5 people that you were? He was a big advisor, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a big employee of the company, a big part of our legal team. I think that everyone sort of in those positions were people I was trying to consult with, and I don't want to sort of go into details of where they were at unless they kind of give me permission to do so. But you can look through who were, the core developers, the core people on the legal side, the core people on the ventures M&A side, and on customer support, VIP support. Like, all of those people were sort of huddling around to some extent, and trying to figure out like what the right things to do were. But at the same time, I was not as communicative to some of those as I wished that I had been. I was, including some people on that list. And I think in retrospect, that was a failing of mine as well. I was very nervous to say something company-wide that, both because I wanted to make sure I didn't say something that I didn't believe, and I wasn't sure what was happening. Like, I was trying to figure it out in real time, but also because at some point, everything that I said started leaking out pretty quickly. And so it sort of broke down the ability to have that much of a distinction between company-wide communications and public communications. But I think in retrospect, I wish that I'd just been, saying what I knew when I knew it pretty transparently, and accepted the fact that I was going to guess wrong sometimes, and the fact that a lot of it was going to get out publicly, because I think I owed it to the employees who had been fighting with us for years to tell them what I knew when I knew it, even if I wasn't confident in it.
Chet, I'll let you continue with the questions.
Yes. So Reuters reported $10 billion in funds. We really need to get back to this point. The $10 billion in funds were transferred without FTX customer knowledge to Alameda from FTX. Ellison herself said this in a statement, right? So is it true, or that you or the team had management of the controlling owner, right there, move these funds regardless of method from FTX to Alameda?
So I do think that there was, Alameda ended up with a substantial margin position open on the exchange. I think that, just the over collateralized margin position was a fair bit of it. I think that the avenue that Rand talked about with the historical wire transfers was part of it as well. I think, you add those up, and I think you probably get to most of it. Although again, I don't have all the data right now, so that's sort of piecing it together. And a lot of these
where did the funds come from that Alameda was able to margin?
Sorry, when we say that they're able to margin.
Yes, because that margin is a loan, effectively, correct?
Yep.
Alameda. Where did the funds come from for that loan?
They were, and the collateral came from assets that Alameda owned, and the liabilities were, a short margin position open on FTX, coming from, the assets that FTX had.
And how did you know this much about this move, even though you said you didn't know there was that much on the sheets?
Oh, a lot of these are things that I have pieced together after the fact that I did not know at the time, or was not fully aware of at the time. This is sort of a hodgepodge of things that I knew, things that I didn't know but have since found out, and things that I'm guessing at given what I've been able to find out, but I'm not entirely confident in.
Were FTX consumers made aware of this?
But Sam.
Yep.
Just before I want to go on that specific point. Alameda. Is it possible that Alameda was withdrawing real dollars from FTX and instead putting FTT as collateral? So almost taking FTT, putting it as collateral, and then withdrawing real dollars in exchange as against that FTT collateral?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of clients were doing that. I do believe Alameda was doing that as well, and was doing that for a substantial size.
Yeah, I mean, the size that I saw was more than they were supposed to have as unlocked tokens. Do you think it's possible that maybe they were leveraging more tokens than they had unlocked?
I don't believe it's more than were unlocked, because all FTT tokens are unlocked at this point. There are separately, so I think that what CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap sort of denoted as circulating tokens, I believe that was effectively not counting FTT tokens held on FTX. I think that's roughly how it was implemented, that it was because it's just done by looking at a set of blockchain addresses, and we're basically taking all tokens except for those on some specific subset of blockchain addresses. And I think what that was doing was just excluding at least some, if not all, of FTX's wallets from that calculation, and probably had been for a little while. So I think that the circulating supply calculations on CoinMarket and CoinGecko were, I mean, they're displaying a particular thing. I don't think that thing was necessarily what was the most intuitive thing, but all FTT had been unlocked for a little while.
Thanks, man.
And you stated in your text, leaked on Vox, that you knew deposits from FTX consumers were essentially lent out to Alameda, and that Alameda then invested with these funds, correct?
Something roughly like that.
Okay, and so you then would have had to been aware of that happening. In that report, now by Reuters, we referred to back, it also stated that up to $2 billion of those funds are now missing. When Reuters asked you about this, no clarity was given. In fact, you responded with 3 question marks. So I'm asking you in front of our audience here, the live crypto audience here, where did that $2 billion go?
I'm so confused. So first of all, I didn't say knew as of when that was happening. It's not clear to me what you were saying there in terms of when I knew that. But
I'm not sure that I asked you a question, Sam. Can we just stick on that? I'm trying to keep this to where we can keep it very cordial and really inform the audience. So, in that report, it said $2 billion of those funds are now missing, right? From the 10 billion, they're released up to 2 billion, at least 1 to 2 billion gone from the balance sheet, disappeared. No one knows where they're at. Where did that $2 billion go?
I have no idea what that's referring to.
Okay. So you had no oversight of that much money being able to just disappear from one of your firms?
Wait, I'm not sure. Sorry. I'm not sure I'm even agreeing that is what happened. I'm confused by that statement.
There's a report from Reuters that says that up to $2 billion of the $10 billion that was moved, that you just said you knew was moved.
Which $10 billion that was moved?
The $10 billion that was moved to FTX without customer knowledge from Alameda to FTX. The 10 billion that we were just talking about, that you just said that you knew we were talking about. I don't understand the confusion.
I'm not sure about a 10 billion number. Sorry, if you could point me to this article, I think it would help.
Yes, anyone feel free to pin that Reuters article to the top of the space. So, all right. So we'll move past that for right now, and I'll go back to that in a second. So in October 2021, you conducted a raise for FTX, correct?
I mean, there were raises over the course of 2021, yeah.
Okay, but you did a specific raise with Sequoia and some others. 69 investors to be precise, including Sequoia, which called it a meme round. How much was that raised for?
I don't remember how much that round was. Was that the 400 million round, roughly?
Yeah, $420 at $420.69 million dollars, raised from 69 investors, which is quite called a meme one. What were those funds used for?
Acquisitions.
Did you take any of that money?
who is you here? Is you
SBF, Sam, the person I'm talking to? Did you take any of that money?
To my knowledge, that was used for acquisitions for FTX.
According to FTX financial records, internal records reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, actually 3/4 of that raise, $300 million, went directly to you from you selling some of your stake in the company. Where did that $300 million go?
Oh, sorry. The particular $300 million from the resale, that I'm not sure that's that same round that you're talking about. I think that it may have been that one. My memory is it was a different one, but you might be right. But either way, that was or slightly before that, I had bought Binance out of their stake in FTX for a few $billions. And then had resold a small portion of that secondary to investors. So it went to recouping the costs from buying Binance out.
Okay, and you said you didn't conduct any risk management at FTX and Alameda in all essence. When you and you said this in the New York Times Dealbook Summit yesterday, correct?
I may said I did I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but I did way less than I should have.
You said essentially there was none. When you pitched your firms to accredited U.S. investors, did you tell them there was no risk management in place?
So there was some risk management in place. I myself did very little there. I wish that I had done way more, and I myself did very little in terms of appointing anyone to do it. Now, there was a lot of risk management that was in place in terms of automated, risk management systems, but there was not, in retrospect, good oversight of this. That was a big mistake. I don't believe that I made any material misstatements to prospective investors, although obviously I can't, I don't have recollection of everything that I said. Everything that I said,
what did you present to them as like the risk management profile of FTX when you pitched to them?
I don't remember.
Was that part of it?
I don't remember detailed conversations about it. I'm not sure there weren't. There were a lot of conversations that happened. I'm not sure there weren't, but I don't particularly remember many.
So there weren't a lot of due diligence processes that took place?
And I think that there were due diligence on some things. I think there's a lot of due diligence done on my sense.
Okay, I think we lost Sam again.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back.
You're back. You dropped out 5 seconds. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, continue, Sam.
My sense is, and I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but my sense is roughly that when people were doing their diligence here, that prospective investors were thinking of it primarily from the perspective here. They were looking at the upside here. They were looking at, what could the business become? How could it grow? That's what you generally do as a venture investor. And if you are, primarily concerned about, the downside of venture investment, that probably means it's an investment that you don't want to make and aren't going to bother investigating in the first place.
So, so the point that you're making is that they didn't need to look into the risk management profile?
I'm not necessarily saying they didn't need. I mean, I don't want to make a statement about what they needed to or didn't need to do, but I think from their perspective, that they saw themselves as, I would guess, as primarily looking into what is the upside of this business, and.
Okay. And did I lose you there?
Yeah, sorry, but
it stops.
But at the end of the day, obviously, I don't want to talk for them. They should talk for themselves.
Okay. And did you ever update your investors on the status of your risk management profile?
I don't remember having a specific, update specifically related to that. I don't remember everything that's been said, but I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at there, or if you're asking did I have a special session where called update of risk management? No.
Did you have any regular meetings with your investors?
Yeah, we would have a call every few months to talk about the business.
Okay, and the ways that you were controlling customer assets or anything like that, that just didn't come up, is what you're saying?
I don't think it particularly did.
Okay, so that interesting. Now, yesterday in the New York Times Dealbook Summit, you made an interesting statement. So it kind of stuck out to me. You said you, quote, marked the assets Alameda used as collateral. How then were you not aware of the size of Alameda's FTT collateral then? And wouldn't this mean that you had access to Alameda's bookkeeping?
Sorry, you said that at the Dealbook Summit, I said...
You said that you were, when you were asked about
Yep.
the marking of the assets and whether they were marked properly. Do you remember that question from Sorkin?
Vaguely, yeah.
Okay. And you responded saying that with Alameda Research, you marked those assets, and that would mean that you were the one who had determined the price of them on the book, correct?
We had algorithms which determined the price of those on the book.
Okay, so then what did you mean by you had marked the assets at Alameda?
I think I was... so I don't remember the exact phrase that I said. It may have been me just saying, like, we as in, like, FTX, the product, were marking all assets to mark prices. But I'm sorry, I actually don't remember exactly what I had said then.
Okay. But I said to you that you said that you had marked the assets. That is something that you said directly in response to his question as to whether you thought that they were marked properly. And you felt that you might not have marked them properly while you were marking them at Alameda, up against everything else. But in doing so, that would mean that, like, that is access to the books, is it not?
Sorry, so this is, to be clear, marking the assets of Alameda on FTX, right? Looking at the collateral that Alameda held.
No, this is just marking Alameda's assets. You didn't say anything about FTX specifically assets or Alameda's assets on FTX. You were specifically mentioning how much was marked as far as the collateral of Alameda.
Yeah, but I think that was implicitly the collateral that it had on FTX, is my memory of what that was referring to. But I mean, either way, sorry, I can talk about what I actually think here.
Okay.
Which is that in general, like, FTX was marking assets to what their mark prices were, and that when I was thinking about the risk profile of large positions on FTX, and specifically of Alameda's position, which I was also surprised by the size of in retrospect, but in addition to that when I was thinking about not from a formal marking perspective, but from a just in my mind, how do I think about this? Is this something I feel nervous about? Is this something that I need to be investigating more perspective? That I was substantially underestimating what crash risk would look like. And I was thinking about, a 50% haircut as a substantial, very large haircut, rather than as, possibly even an underestimate of what would be necessary for a short period crash in some circumstances. So, I think it was, I certainly think that I made some big mistakes there in how I was thinking about it.
Okay.
Sam, sorry, it's running again.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to. There were a couple of accusations about the way that you ran the exchange, and I really want to try and get to the bottom of it. One of the accusations was someone that went onto BitBoy show. I'm not sure if you heard the show, but he mentioned that FTX was creating more tokens than there were in circulation, or more tokens than they were given for their market making role, almost creating synthetic tokens and trading in these synthetic tokens that they never really had. And he had some really convincing evidence. He showed a little bit of, like, on-chain data in terms of, the number of tokens that they sent to FTX versus the number of tokens in FTX, and the tokens that were returned. And his accusation was that FTX was trading synthetic or fake tokens to manipulate price. Do you think that could have happened?
Sorry. So I think that I frankly don't know actually exactly what you're referring to there. I'm sorry, did not hear that particular one. I'd love to look into that more if you could, like, send me a link to that and get back to you on that. But I And FTX
But
didn't raise
let
as
me
well,
just explain it to you again. Let me just explain it to you. Like for example, when a token gets listed in exchange, sometimes the token would be required to give the exchange to lodge certain tokens with the exchange in their role as a market maker. And this specific project claimed that you were selling more tokens than you had as a market maker. And when the time came for FTX to return the tokens to the project, there weren't enough tokens. And I'm just trying to understand, like, do you think that it could be possible that maybe you guys created, call it fake synthetic tokens, fake tokens, that kind?
So I think you're probably talking about Alameda there, not FTX, and I don't know the details of that. I'm sorry, I wasn't running Alameda, and but I can try and look into that.
Simon, I know you had a question as well.
Go ahead,
Simon.
No, maybe it would be good to look at some of like the key events, because obviously we've gone quite deep here into like the specifics around. I think maybe some of the things leading up to what got here, like starting at the Luna situation, a lot of people don't have real clarity on people's involvements in that. So one of the, like, Sam, it would be great to hear your perspective on, like, a lot of people believe that there was some efforts from people really exposed to Luna, to try and save Luna or and there was some renegs of certain agreements. My understanding was like Celsius, Galaxy, Almeida. Could you share with us like any of the things that were happening between those that were significantly affected? Because obviously this is the start of the story.
So I actually know surprisingly little about the Luna side of this. I don't, like, to my knowledge, neither FTX nor nor Alameda were particularly involved in Luna. Obviously the market crash was quite relevant for them in the industry as a whole. But I don't think that there's that much specific, if any, specific Luna involvement. I think that there were I guess I think that, like, there were a lot of, there are obviously a lot of blowouts in, like, borrow lending desks around then that came from sort of secondary exposure to Luna, flowing through Three Arrows and other places. But I don't know much outside of that.
Do you know, like, anyone that made significant money from the Luna collapse? Was there a way of like shorting the stable coin on using any of the products on FTX?
I think there are probably a lot of good arbitrages to do. Like, I do think that is likely the case, and I think that things were just like not trading really exactly in line for most of that period. So, I think they're really good trades to do then.
Did you have any like meetings yourself or anyone in the team about, like, with like Alex Majinsky, people from Celsius, Novogratz, or any of these people that were deeply affected by it? Was there any kind of meetings that about where people were trying to figure out what to do? Because there's like rumors that when Celsius decided to try and get out for some of their clients, that was like a renege of some kind of agreement, and that upset a lot of people. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I mean, obviously I had some meetings with, like, borrow lending firms around that time, around the troubles they were facing, but I don't unfortunately know anything about things specific to really, like, the Luna side.
So I've got, Simon, I've just sent you through a username. Chairman, I'll let you ask your question, man. Thanks for patiently waiting. Simon, I've sent you a username. Do you mind? Because my Spaces is glitching. Can you send them an invite up? I've just sent you the username. So to send an invite up, you got to click on the icon at the bottom, guests, click on speakers, and click on invite speakers and add the username. But Chairman, I'll let you ask your question, man.
Yeah, Sam, would you be willing to go on Up Only, hosted by Kobe and Ledger Status?
Potentially. I suspect that I have been messaged about that. I'm sorry, I'm still digging through my my backlog of messages. But I'll try and put that on schedule.
Don't come
I've
on.
got
Don't you gotta go on it. Come on.
I've got another question for you as well, Sam. The tweet.